So how does a Jersey kid end up in Northwestern? What attracted you to going to Chicago like that?
Northwestern was as far away as my parents would let me go to college because they felt I needed to be close enough that it was one could get in the car and drive. So that was the edge. That was the distance. I wanted to flee a little bit. So that's as far as I was allowed to go.
And then as far as getting onto Saturday Night Live, can you tell me a bit about first getting into, stand-up comedy a bit and kind of getting into, I know you were writing kind of jokes and you were submitting them for Weekend Update?
Yeah, I wasn't much of a stand-up comic. I did the slightest amount of stand-up comedy, but I was not a diligent stand-up. But I did a lot of improv in Los Angeles and a little in Chicago and a little in high school, and so that was my performance comedy background. And my first writing job was in Saturday Night Live, and I got that through writing Weekend Update jokes and through a friend, emailing them to the show.
That was the first year of Keenan on that show? It was
the first year of Keenan. So now that Keenan is the longest running player, it does make me think about my own mortality because it felt so recent.
And then as far as your jump into TV, I love the fact that your kind of first United States of Tara was with Diablo.
Yes.
And Toni Collette, Strong Women.
Strong Women.
And then you jumped to Up All Night, Emily and Christina.
Strong Women, yeah.
And then you jumped to New Girl, which is also Elizabeth and Emily. I mean, you're talking Strong Women for those first big hitters. What was that experience like? What did you gain most from writing on those, especially United States of Tara, because you wrote almost 10 episodes? You were on staff for them.
I was on staff for that. I wrote 4 episodes.
4, okay.
That was great. It was my first foray into narrative television. I had worked as a screenwriter, like an unproduced screenwriter. That was what sustained me for a few years, writing scripts that ultimately were not made. And I kind of wanted to get into TV because TV was just sort of starting to get into what it is now, and I just kind of wanted to be around other writers. And that show felt like a cool hybrid of ostensibly a comedy, but real dark moments, real dramatic moments, and just powerhouse actors, a powerhouse cast. Diablo created it, but it was Toni Collette, it was Brie Larson, and it was a really cool show and a great group of people, so that was really fun.
And Up All Night, Lauren produced that as well, or
Lauren produced that, yeah.
Was that the connection to that, or was it your work on Tara?
I mean, it may surprise you, but Lauren and I aren't close buddies who call each other a lot. No, it was Emily Spivey and I worked on Saturday Night Live together.
Very cool.
That's what helped that job.
Was there anyone on Saturday Night Live that you, on the female side of the cast, that you really clicked with working with?
I mean, it was just kind of a great era for female performers on that show. So, so Tina was the head writer then, and learned a lot working there, and that was Amy Poehler and Rachel Dratch and Maya Rudolph, and really, really an incredible group over there.
How do you jump from strong women like that to the ultimate kind of man show, Mad Men? How did that transition work for you as a writer?
Oh, Mad Men is secretly a very, very female heavy show. It very, very female on the staff, and then I think a lot of the strongest characters in the show are the women on the show. So it didn't feel like a vast transition. It didn't feel like it was a super male energy kind of scenario. So the transition didn't feel as drastic as it may look on paper.
Was it fun to dive back kind of into different decades and do something like that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's stuff I love. That's stuff that I often work on in my own stuff, things that are heavily researched and things that exist in a really kind of distinct, heavily kind of curated world. That's a lot of things that I love. Yeah.
And also during this time, I mean, I know you're still working on film scripts, but you also do Firecracker.
Yes.
Where did Astrid come from? Where is that character?
that like I had that character just existing in my mind for years and years, and I was just constantly trying to figure out how to tell her story, whether it was, I wrote it as a TV pilot, and then I wrote it as a series of short stories, and then I wrote it as a screenplay, and then finally I wrote it as a novel, and the novel felt the clearest expression of her because it was a first-person novel, so it just to exist in her head, in her voice, felt like the best way to embody that character, which to me at that point had felt like a real person that I knew.
It's funny, one of my ex-girlfriends, her little sister, I got that for her birthday. This was like 2014, so
cool.
A year after the book. And the amount of comebacks after she read that book, like, she became the wittiest person I knew because she would come back at people.
Oh, that's awesome. It's so great to hear.
It was cool. She loved Astrid. I'm curious then, what was the meetings like when you met Sam in kind of the Mr. Robot kind of world?
It still sort of came up as like most TV jobs do. Agent submitted, read a sample, and I met with him, and the pilot existed then. So I'd watched the pilot, and but from the pilot I didn't fully know what his vision for the show was until sitting with him. I mean, I think that you could have watched that pilot and it kind of could have gone in a lot of different ways, where it just could have been about this guy who, righted the wrongs of the world, but just by his computer hacking skill, without realizing that Sam had this whole narrative with all of these twists and turns sort of built in his head. So when I walked into that job, it was already pretty fleshed out in what that show was going to be.
What do you think that you added to it? Because, I mean, there's some interesting side characters. I love Grace Gummer in it. Her performance in it is... That was
after my time.
Oh.
So I added nothing there. You know what? Like many shows, like very much came from the authorial vision of Sam, but in the conversations that we had there, like, it was just important to me to try to push for some of heart to pop into that show and to follow to track emotions in that show, which I know was always sort of built in, but just to make sure keeping it to the surface while all of the all the darkness persisted.
Do you find it more fun to lean on your more witty comedic side when you're writing, or did you like diving into something a little bit darker like in this show?
I like doing both. I mean, ideally my favorite things to write have real emotions mixed with jokes, which is how I feel life is. That nobody makes jokes more often than at a funeral, and I feel like that's sort of where my sweet spot is.
You don't go to funerals and make jokes, though, right?
I mean, I have. I wrote a eulogy for my grandfather. It was full of jokes.
My friend was talking about Mr. Graves, so I've got to ask, what was his experience writing for those interesting characters? Nick Nolte's character, I mean, he's a funky president, but little Bill Clinton, a little bit in between the Bill Bush era. Graves was an interesting sort of beast because we didn't know how far, we didn't know what was going to happen in politics by the time the show aired, and I think there was just a lot of conversations of we can't go that far beyond believability about what a politician off the rails would really say, and then I think after the show premiered, there was the reality of oh no, it can get a politician off the rails can do so many different things than we could have possibly realized. But that was a cool show. That was another show where Josh Stern, who created it, had a very distinct idea of where it would be, and we kind of knew that from day one. How'd you get on Mozart in the Jungle? It seems like such a out of left field show.
Jason Schwartzman, who's one of the creators, is somebody I've almost worked with a bunch of times. So we just sort of knew him professionally and he knew my writing, and so that show, at least that season, was kind of done without a writer's room, where they were just sort of like talking to writers on the phone and talking to them about like what the season looked like and what the episode would be, and it was a very much like let's put together some fun art and go with your muse kind of job, which was really cool.
What do you watch or read while all this is going on? Like, what are you a fan of?
Less and less. I mean, I'm a fan of a lot of things. I love TV and movies from when I was a kid. Like, from like the first second. My childhood is very much television oriented, but like, I think ultimately the curse of the more and more you write for TV and film, like the harder it is to like get like great pleasure from things. So I do love things that don't feel like homework or don't feel like close to the things that I like to write. Like, I like a good Game of Thrones, but I also, I enjoy just like the sort of comfort of like watching like Queer Eye or a Great British Baking Show or something like that.
I'm curious when you finally get on the set of like this, the spy, the title, Spy Who Dumped Us.
The Spy Who Dumped Me.
Yeah. Now you finally get that film done, and I know you've been working to get something up on the screen. What was that whole experience like? And also with that cast, Mila and Kate, that must have been amazing. It
was just kind of like a beautiful, transcendent experience. It was all sort of, I wrote it with my friend, and we saw it through till the very last second, and I moved to Europe for 4 months, and the cast was just a dream, and those women are brilliant, and kind of all our cast was pretty great. So it was like, it was just like we wrote a movie about two friends going on an adventure in Europe, and we experienced it as two friends going on an adventure in Europe, and it was so that was a little bit of like why one would want to write movies to begin with, to actually like have the wish fulfillment of what the characters get to go through.
That's so cool. Yeah. When you get to come to like a conference like this that's about writers, what does it mean to you to be able to talk directly to writers? Like, I think that's kind of the specialty of Austin Film Festival.
Yeah, I love talking about writing. I love talking about the actual craft of writing. I don't know how helpful, like, how to get an agent or those questions are, which we often get at these things, but I love kind of just talking about the actual work, and I enjoy it because people did that for me when I was starting out. There were definitely more successful people who helped me out when they had absolutely nothing to gain from it, and I think that is the best case scenario of the sort of cycle of writers, is that people help us and you help other people, and you try to foster talent and find talent and try to encourage people who you feel encouragement could actually make some meaningful change. And I think it's cool. I've never been to this film festival before, and it was just great. Yeah, great hanging out for a few days with a bunch of writers.
Do you mind if I ask what writers have impacted you along your journey? Like, which ones have really made that, like you just said, that moment of Zen kind of work for you?
Actually, people not like people who I've read who have been inspired.
Yeah, like
by.
that have stepped out of their way to help you.
Jeff Garlin, the comedian and sometimes screenwriter, was a big champion of mine. Like from when I was in improv theater. Mike Schur and J.J. Philbin, husband and wife. Separate writers have both helped me get my very, very first job. This writing team, Dave Finkel and Brett Baer, who worked with me on United States of Terra and New Girl, have always been great. And then I have just have built a bunch of friends I really, really love to write with and feel really inspired by. Like my sometimes writing partner Susanna Fogel, I think is brilliant and has really we push each other to succeed all the time, and I love that. And yeah, I just kind of love hanging out with writers and talking to them.
Do you have any stories with Jeff? Jeff's such a crazy, fun guy.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff pulled me up one time on stage in a show he was doing, and that's how I met him. He just was he had a storytelling show at an improv theater, and he just asked if anyone wanted to come up and tell a story, and I did, and he just he absolutely he put me in touch with his manager, who's my manager now, and just helped me out in ways that he absolutely did not have to. And then he came to the premiere of Spy Who Dumped Me, and at a certain point of the movie, grabbed me and picked me up and placed me on his lap, and caressed me like a baby.
As far as what you write now, what are you hoping to do next? Like, what's down the pipeline for David?
I to keep trying to make things. I have a fantasy about directing something in the near future. I've written a ton of pilots in my day, but I'd love to get one made. And I think just keep setting like goalposts a little bit higher all along the way that you can sort of try to attain from the last one. It's not a job in which I think anyone is ever like, all right, I've accomplished it. Now I can turn away and be fine. I think it is like a constant sort of moving thing, and every job is the next job. And but I enjoy writing, so I just kind of want to keep doing a version of what I've always done.
When do you write? Are you a morning, nighttime? Like, what's your writing process?
I'm not a night person, so mornings, like late mornings, early afternoon, I think is my sweet spot. I get like kind of tuckered out around closer to dinner time. I don't think I can do much more. So I'm that kind of person. I think ideally I could start really early, but I feel like now, like, there's just, my dogs demand longer and longer walks. It just takes a little longer to get moving.
Everywhere I looked, when it brings up your wife, it talks about her taxidermy work. I'm curious, do you have any crazy fun taxidermy animals or things in your house? Like, what's in your house?
We used to have way too much taxidermy in our house, and now my wife has a studio. The studio is technically in our house, in our basement, but most of her work is down there, and she's mostly a bird taxidermist. So those are a little bit smaller and more manageable. But we have variously had a mountain lion in our home.
So cool. Well, I kind of last question. I love that you have food on your shirt, and you've got like
thanks.
Yeah, like you've got different styles. When you get to come to a place like Austin for the first time, do you try and search out for something food-wise that you haven't had, or are you kind of strict to a diet like this?
Oh gosh, no, yeah, absolutely. Search out, what it. Barbecue is a thing here, so I definitely had barbecue, and a couple days. Sought out some breakfast tacos yesterday. I think those were the things I was told I needed to do. I've been to Austin before, but the last time I went to Austin, I was not. Franklin's barbecue was out of meat, so so this time I had to make sure. I had to wait on the endlessly long line and get some Franklin's.
Yeah,
barbecue.
How early did you wake up for it? That's crazy.
I did it my first full day here on Thursday, so I got there around, nothing crazy. I think I got there around 11. And I got my food at 1:30.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I guess lastly, I'd love to know, are you going to dive back into writing books or anything? I know that takes up so much time, but do you have any idea to do that? I would love to, and I have like kind of a half-finished thing that I've been working on, and it does just take a lot of time and so it is sometimes hard to sort of justify it. But I really do love writing books, so I do hope to finish one again in the near future. Well, David, we've loved your journey along the way, and
thank you, man.
Can't wait to see what's next.
All right, thanks so much.